Hello everyone, and welcome to today's live broadcast, DARPA's Brain Function Portfolio. I am Brenda Kelly Kim of LabRoots, and I'll be your moderator for today's event. We have a few important announcements before we begin. This presentation has been approved for a Category 1 Continuing Medical Education credit by Loma Linda University. If you are interested in obtaining CMEs after attending this presentation, please click on the Get Your Free CME CE Credits button in the bottom left corner of the event screen. This webcast is designed to be interactive, and we encourage you to ask questions during the event. You can submit questions by typing them in the Q&A box, which can be found by clicking on the green Q&A button at the lower left of the presentation window. We'll try to answer as many questions as we can. You can enlarge the slide window by clicking on the screen icon in the lower right-hand corner of the slide window. If you have any technical problems viewing or hearing this presentation, please click on the support button at the top right of your presentation window, or submit your problem through the green Q&A button lower left. I would now like to introduce our speaker, Dr. Justin Sanchez. Dr. Sanchez joined DSO as a program manager in 2013. Before coming to DARPA, Dr. Sanchez was an associate professor of biomedical engineering and neuroscience at the University of Miami and a faculty member of the Miami Project to Cure Paralysis. He directed the Neuroprosthetics Research Group, where he oversaw development of the neural interface medical treatments and neurotechnology for treating paralysis and stroke, and for deep brain stimulation for movement disorders, Tourette syndrome, and obsessive-compulsive disorder. He has published more than 75 peer-reviewed papers, holds 7 patents in neuroprosthetic design, and authored a book on the design of brain-machine interfaces. Dr. Sanchez holds Doctor of Philosophy and Master of Engineering degrees in Biomedical Engineering and a Bachelor of Science degree in Engineering Science, all from the University of Florida. I will now turn it over to Dr. Sanchez for his presentation.
So thank you so much for the great introduction there, and it's a real pleasure to give a presentation to all of you today. We're living in an extremely exciting time. We have international efforts that are just ramping up and ongoing in the area of brain science and neurotechnology, and it's just an extraordinary period of time to be thinking about the function of the brain and the potential for the brain, again, moving into the future. One of my goals for the talk today is to give everybody an update on the work that we're doing at DARPA as a part of our brain function research portfolio. So as you can see from the screen here, we're not going to have any slides, and I'd just like to give some remarks on some of the work that's ramping up and how we're going about that work. Okay, so just to get started here, the portfolio of programs that I'm managing is in support of President Obama's Brain Initiative. Again, this was a effort that was kicked off in 2013, and multiple federal agencies are collaboratively working to deliver upon some of the goals of President Obama's Brain Initiative. Now, one aspect that we feel very strongly about here at DARPA is the connection between the promise of the Brain Initiative and the delivery of the objectives of the Brain Initiative. And we're working extremely hard on the delivery part about this. So again, it's very easy to say we want to study the brain, we want to tackle some of the many challenges of the brain, but how do we actually get to that delivery phase? And there are a couple key ideas that are really going to help us move forward on that. And they consist of the following aspects. One is to seek out what we call non-traditional insight and capabilities in order to see into the brain in a very different way. You know, one might think that fundamental neuroscience is the only way to go about addressing some of the issues of the Brain Initiative. And at DARPA, we say, yes, that is a foundational science and a foundational area that should be part of the Brain Initiative. But there are also other areas, there are other people, and again, non-traditional areas that may be able to provide insight into the problems associated with the Brain Initiative. The second component that we feel very strongly about is this aspect. We really want to ensure that the scientific conversations and endeavors remain very relevant to the public. Ultimately, it's the taxpayer that is supporting the BRAIN initiative, and we need to make sure that everything that we deliver back has high relevance and high meaning to the general society, right? So there's a social contract that goes along with doing this kind of work, and we want to make sure that we're not just doing science for the sake of science, but are doing science in order to really, again, give back to the people that are ultimately supporting this effort. And then the third part that's extremely important is that significant innovation is needed in order to enable these new opportunities. And this really is kind of boiled down to the hard work, right? It's not just talking about the BRAIN initiative, it's not just talking about the brain, it's actually doing that fundamental science or doing that fundamental technology transition in order to make the kinds of things available moving forward into the future. So we're pushing on all of those areas, and again, working really hard in order to make those capabilities accessible to people so that they can do great work and innovate in this space. Now, at DARPA, the people that we serve are military personnel. You know, DARPA is a part of the DoD, and whenever we think about the brain or we think about neuroscience with respect to the brain, we think about those military personnel and all of the complex and challenging situations that military personnel face. So again, if you think about all of the services that are out there, again, the people that keep our country safe, you know, whether it's by land, by air, or by sea, these people have to learn how to control very complex systems. They're under extraordinary types of stress, you know, stresses that many of us, have never experienced or probably would never want to experience, and, you know, that makes their job very difficult. And then, you know, those military personnel are also subject to extraordinary injury that results from the, you know, very difficult job of protecting our country. So, you know, we often think about brain sciences and neurotechnology in that kind of context and framework, and think about how we can, again, give back to those people that, again, are living with that stress and are subject to that extraordinary injury, and paying back the debt to them in terms of their commitment to serving the country. So we always got to keep that in mind, again, not just doing science for the sake of science, but doing science to deliver a capability to the people that are ultimately serving this great nation. So with that in mind, you know, let's talk a little bit about the science. Okay, so there's a long history of neuroscience of the brain. You know, people have been doing this kind of research for a long period of time. And I'd just like to highlight that there's a transition happening today. Okay, so as you saw from the title of this presentation, it's about brain function research. And it's quite interesting that, you know, when the original concepts were being kind of tossed around with respect to the BRAIN initiative, you know, there's a lot of talk about brain activity maps, okay, like static maps. And that's interesting, right? That approach is out there and that concept is out there. But, you know, at DARPA we feel that, you know, the idea of a map or an anatomic, you know, set of structures is very much rooted in like the early 1900s. You know, people were working during that time to make demarcations in the brain and trying to understand at least where those demarcations are. As we kind of fast forward to kind of like the late 1900s, or even getting into the early 2010, 2011, 2012, this focused more like brain function research, right? Actively engaging the brain as it interacts with the environment, developing tools for understanding the dynamic interaction of the brain with the environment, and understanding the ongoing production of neural activity in both normal and abnormal situations, like with respect to disease. So, you know, we're very much focused on developing not only tools to understand or access this kind of information, but also developing the techniques in order to analyze those neural signals and then put them to good use, whether it's for restoration of function or even just understanding how the brain processes information in general. Okay, so again, it's all about brain function research, and again, one of my goals of today is to give everybody a highlight and overview of the kinds of projects that we're working on that are in this brain function arena. Okay, all right, so shifting gears here a little bit, let's talk about the exact portfolio of projects that we're working on. And they cover multiple domains. And let me just give everybody a high-level insight into those domains, okay? So we talk about function. The first function that the agency was really interested in is in the domain of movement and control, okay? So many military personnel in service of this nation their ability to move is affected, right? They could be injured by a spinal cord injury, or they could be injured in such a way that they lose a limb, and their ability to move is taken away from them. And if you think about, let's say, for example, upper extremity issues, right? So losing an arm to amputation. For many military personnel, before DARPA kind of started doing this kind of work, the best solution that we had for them was a metal hook, a metal prosthetic hook. And at DARPA, we said this isn't enough. We've got to do better. We've got to come up with a new technology or a new way of kind of thinking about restoring movement after injury. So we developed a program called Revolutionizing prosthetics, that its mission was to develop a new prosthetic system and, again, deliver really remarkable control of that system. Okay, so that's one area we're going to talk about today, again, in the domain of movement and control. We've been very successful in that domain, and it really sparked the next series of things that I'm going to tell you about. And again, it's an expanded function. So we have a new program that just got off the ground very recently. It's called Restoring Active Memory. And the idea of this program is to develop prosthetic devices for the restoration of memory function. So traumatic brain injury, again, military personnel, many of them suffer from it. And one of the functions that is lost after a traumatic brain injury is memory function. So the ability to form and recall memories. So again, we have this new program in memory neuroprosthetics. It's called RAM, or Restoring Active Memory. Kind of moving along here in terms of our portfolio, the third area I'd like to tell you a little bit about today is in the neuropsychiatric domain. So again, many military personnel suffer from and with a variety of neuropsychiatric issues, ranging from PTSD to depression and anxiety and pain and addiction. And again, if we think about what are the available treatments for neuropsychiatric illness right now, it's kind of, go talk to your therapist, lay out on the couch, take some medications. We think that that's not enough. Those methods, while they can be effective in some ways, may not be as precise as we ultimately want. So we are looking at prosthetics in that domain, so developing closed-loop neural interfaces that can be capable of treating or affecting neuropsychiatric illness. And the name of the program associated with this kind of work is called SubNex. All right, that stands for Systems-Based Neurotechnology for Emerging Therapies. We know that neuropsychiatric illness not only affects one structure of the brain, but multiple sub-networks of the brain. And that's why we called this program with that name, SubNex, because it really kind of captures the idea that is associated with building devices in this domain. The last idea that I'll just like to share with you is kind of part of our full portfolio here is a program called NeuroFast. That stands for Neurofunction, Activity, Structure, and Technology. And compared to all of the other programs that I've just described there, the NeuroFast program changes the way that we interface with the brain. So again, compared to Revolutionizing Prosthetics, RAM, and the SubNex program, those are all based in electrophysiology. We know that there are some limitations related to electrophysiology. We can't capture simultaneously brain structure and activity at the same time. So we ask the question, can we develop a new program that fundamentally changes the way that we interface with the brain? We're trying to do that in the NeuroFast program. The focus there is on developing optical interfaces with the brain. So again, fundamental approach change. If we use optical interfaces, we may be able to get both simultaneous brain structure and brain activity, again, at the same time from the same awake and behaving animal. Okay, so again, that's an overview of our neurotechnology, neuroscience portfolio. What I'd like to do next is go into each one of those in a little bit more detail and tell you about some of the work that we're doing there. I do see one question here about somebody asking, are we moving through the slides? So again, just a heads up for everybody here that I'm just providing remarks. We are just having this one title slide here, and we're just drilled down in a conversational form on each one of these programs. Okay? All right, so let's go through all that portfolio one by one. Let's start with the Revolutionizing Prosthetics program. And let me tell you about some of the advancements that have happened there. So again, remember the fundamental problem here was people that are living with, let's say, upper extremity amputations, the best that we could give to them were metal hooks as a solution to losing your upper arm. And we wanted to do much better than that. So the agency set out to develop next generation kinds of prosthetic systems. We actually developed 2 arms. One was developed by DECA. This is Dean Kamen's company, the same person that developed the Segway. We have a remarkable arm system called, it kind of has a nice name called the Luke arm. It was just FDA approved in the last year. So again, it's really remarkable. DARPA gets into this space, develops a really advanced prosthetic arm system, and we took it from concept all the way to FDA approval. Remarkable thing about this arm system, it has the same size, weight, shape, and grip strength compared to an adult human arm. It's completely modular, so if you need just a hand, we can give you a hand. If you need, 3/4 of your arm, we can give you 3/4 of your arm. Or if you need a full arm, we can also give you a full arm. Again, the system is completely modular, and again, a prosthetist can prescribe any level of arm that one ultimately needs. The second arm system I'd like to tell you about here was developed by the Johns Hopkins University Applied Physics Lab. This is a modular prosthetic limb. It's a little bit different compared to the DECA arms, very dexterous, and it has some more functionality in terms of how it moves compared to the DECA arm system. Again, it's also completely modular. Again, depending upon your injury, you can get any level of prosthetic that you ultimately need. Remarkable aspect of both of these arm systems is that since we got into doing this kind of work, 97 people have logged a combined 12,000 hours of user testing on these arm systems. And again, this is remarkable, right? You think about DARPA as being this agency that's just kind of working in these far off kinds of spaces. Revolutionizing prosthetics is a great example of, we set the bar really high and went after a really tough problem. We developed physical arm systems. There's a lot of people that are using those arm systems and a lot of hours engaged with those arm systems. And we hope to, again, continue to push forward on those arm systems moving into the future. Now, the way that we control those arms, there are a variety of control modalities. For the DECA arm that was approved by the FDA, it's approved for using inertial sensors to control the arm. So again, you can put little sensors on your feet, and as you kind of move your feet around, the arm system will respond to that. It also can be driven by EMG activity. So again, putting little sensors on your limbs and sensing when you're contracting your muscles as a control modality. But one of the things that we really push hard upon, again, this aspect is not FDA approved yet, but is one of the big demonstrations on the program, is that we wanted near natural upper extremity kind of control. And we know that if we really want that near natural control, you got to go directly back to the brain. So we created an arm of the program where you could implant a microelectrode array into the primary motor cortex, and we had a few individuals actually use their motor cortex signals directly out of their motor cortex to actuate the arm systems. And if you've ever seen some of these videos that are out there on the internet, they're pretty remarkable. The control is very natural. A person can just describe how they're moving the arm. No additional effort beyond imagining controlling just your own natural arm. So again, really remarkable feat of science and technology, and have made great progress there. A few notes just about this brain actuated control of the arm. There's a lot of people that were working on rehabilitation science in conjunction with this effort. And they've tried brain actuation, a variety of things. Exoskeletons have been trying to do kind of rehab kind of techniques like box and blocks kinds of tasks and things like that. So again, it really presents a new avenue of rehabilitation and therapy for people living with these kinds of injuries. Moving into the future of revolutionizing prosthetics, there are a couple areas that are really interesting. We've really tried to push on the robotics side of this, of building some intelligence into those robotics, and thinking about shared control between the user's brain and the intelligent robotics. There's a lot of opportunities there for that kind of work. And again, there are a few people in the country kind of working on these kinds of things. And then the last area that's it's really you know, kind of bubbling up to the top, and kind of the last milestone that we're trying to achieve here, is that everything I've told you about right now has just been on the motor side of things. We are working to instrument the fingertips of our advanced arm systems with force transducers, such that we can add the sensory component. So again, technology didn't exist necessarily to do this on these arm systems, so there's a hardware side that needs to be built. But then the secondary, more difficult side is, can we put electrode arrays in the primary sensory cortex and provide inputs into the brain that would allow somebody to perceive the sense of touch through the arm systems. So that's the last milestone that we're trying to achieve on that program. Again, working really hard to achieve that working into the future. Okay, so that's Revolutionizing Prosthetics program. A lot of work has happened on that thus far. Again, a few last really big challenges, so stay tuned for the new developments coming in that arena. All right, so moving on here, I'd like to talk about the next area of brain function research that we're working on. You remember this progression. We're going from motor control now to memory restoration. Okay, so again, neuroprosthetic control is very interesting to DARPA. We think it's a very new modality for interfacing with the brain. We're doing it for motor kinds of systems, but now the question becomes, for human subjects, how do we develop closed loop, you know, sensing and stimulating of the brain to restore the function to form and recall memories? Again, for people living with traumatic brain injury, this is a huge problem. The kinds of options that are available to restore this function, people living with those disabilities, are few and far between. So we're saying, can we use neurotechnology to ultimately do this? So again, for the RAM program, Restoring Active Memory, the vision and goal is to develop neuroprosthetics for memory recovery in human subjects living with this kind of injury. Now, the RAM program is interesting because this is DARPA's, it's not our first foray into this area of research. We actually had a predicate program called the REMIND program, where investigators showed in animal subjects that some aspects of memory could be recalled. So many of you may have heard of Ted Berger and Sam Deadweiler. They were the investigators on this program, again doing fantastic kind of work in animal subjects, showing for delayed match to sample kinds of paradigms that these simple aspects of memory could be facilitated through a closed-loop neuroprosthetic device. And that was even under conditions of you know, diminished you know, brain functioning, so like a brain injury. So again, these initial efforts laid some of the foundations for, you know, the hardware that could be used to interface with the brain and the algorithms that could be used to interface with the brain. As you can imagine, to be able to kind of bridge an injury for memory restoration, we need to be able to sense the signals from the brain, interpret them, and then deliver the specific neural codes that are related to memory function. And this team, again, laid some of the groundwork for that in this REMIND program. Again, just kind of moving forward, the RAM program is about thinking about those aspects and more, but in human subjects. So again, now that we kind of have a foundation for restoring memory in animal subjects, we thought it was a great time to kind of pivot there and start thinking about memory restoration in humans. Now, you know, why would we, again, want to make that pivot point? And there's a very interesting point here. For animal subjects, you can't ask them what they are perceiving in terms of the stimulation that's coming back in terms of the memory function, right? So it's very important to do this kind of memory research in human subjects where they can ultimately report back to you, oh yes, I'm perceiving a memory, or no, I just have, again, kind of a perception of the elements of memory. We don't know yet. So again, now's a good time to be kind of thinking about those and making some initial inroads into this effort. Some of the people that are performing or working on the RAM program, so Sam Deadweiler, Ted Berger, they do have an effort on the RAM program. I'd like to tell you about two other teams that are working on the RAM program. So we have one team out of UCLA. It's led by Itzhak Fried. He's a neurosurgeon who's also been working in the memory arena for many years. And he's developing closed-loop neuroprosthetics in conjunction with Lawrence Livermore National Laboratories for this endeavor. We have another team at the University of Pennsylvania. It's being led by Mike Kahana, again, one of the world's experts in memory function, the field as an entirety. He's working with Medtronic to develop a new memory neuroprosthetic system for this. So just let me tell you a little bit about both of their approaches. Overall in the RAM program, the goal is to develop a fully implantable neuroprosthetic system, again, that can sense, interpret signals from the brain, and deliver precision stimulation for memory formation and recall. The study of memory is a very broad field. Again, there are many different types of memory, and we know that that's a very complex and challenging area. For the initial RAM program, we are just looking at one type of memory, declarative memory. This is memory about facts. And are trying to restore declarative memory again in people that are living with these kinds of disorders. So again, the teams are going to develop neuroprosthetic devices. They're going to develop closed-loop neuroprosthetic experimental paradigms for this, and demonstrate not only their understanding of memory formation and recall, but also show how that prosthetic system can be used in that arena. Now again, compared against these two teams, again, we have UCLA, Itzhak Fried, University of Pennsylvania, Mike Kahana. They have a little bit different approaches to this. So Itzhak Fried, his focus is really in the hippocampus and entorhinal cortex. Again, these are very specific areas that are involved in the formation of memory. He's looking at specific types of modulation of fields of those neuronal firing patterns that are involved in memory formation and recall, and we'll see how his approaches ultimately pan out. Mike Kahana at University of Pennsylvania has a little bit different approach. He's looking at more of the distributed effects of memory formation and recall. So again, we know that the hippocampus and entorhinal cortex is involved in this, but there are other structures of the brain that are involved in more of the kind of consolidation aspects and things like that. So he's taken more of a distributed approach to this problem. The other really interesting example or aspect of Mike Kahana's approach in all of this is that he has multiple clinical centers across the country where he'll be able to, again, interact with a large cohort of human subjects to understand some of these fundamental aspects of memory formation and recall. So again, really looking forward to both of these teams' efforts. Just to give you some background on where they are in their efforts, the RAM program started in July of 2014. So again, we're getting close to 8-9 months of effort on this, and these teams are already in human subjects, gathering their preliminary data, developing their initial devices, and again starting their initial analysis on all of that. So again, really excited for their work, and so please stay tuned for all of their efforts moving forward. Okay, now let's shift gears again here and start talking about, again, the next step in our brain function research portfolio, and let's move into this area I described earlier about neuropsychiatric illness. Okay, so again, more complicated problem for neuroprosthetic design, and one that we're trying to develop the technology for. So again, neuropsychiatric illness is a very difficult kind of problem, and many military personnel are suffering with these kinds of conditions. And again, today, the kinds of therapies that we have for it is, kind of talking to your therapist, prescribing drugs, maybe even having a deep brain stimulation procedure for this. But again, these are, again, not very precise. One of the goals of our neuropsychiatric neuroprosthetic efforts, again, just a recap of the name, this is the subnets program, is to develop a device that can access multiple cortical and subcortical structures and then deliver precision therapy to the circuits that are involved in neuropsychiatric illness. So again, we know in the brain that it's organized in a hierarchical structure. We know that there are multiple levels of abstraction that may be involved in neuropsychiatric illness. And again, today, we don't have the neurotechnology to access all of those structures and even kind of develop a closed-loop neuroprosthetic for the kinds of things that we are talking about. So the goal and the vision of the subnets program is, again, to develop the new understanding and new neural signal modulation approach for these systems-based disorders. And again, we want to really close the loop on these kinds of therapies. We know that it's going to involve maybe 4+ targets of the brain. Again, the technology doesn't exist to get to all of those, so we are developing a technology to do that. So let me tell you a little bit about the teams that are working on this project and tell you about their efforts moving forward. So the first team I'd like to describe is at UCSF, and it's led by Edward Chang. He's a neurosurgeon. And he's teamed up with a great group of investigators that know not only basic neurophysiology, but also computational neuroscience. He's teaming up with a small business called Cortera, as well as a national laboratory, Lawrence Livermore National Lab, to develop a next generation kind of device that can, again, sense from multiple structures of the brain, and on board in that device, interpret that information and then deliver precision stimulation back to the brain for treating those illnesses. So again, fully implantable kind of medical device for neuropsychiatric illness. Now, one very interesting aspect of the UCSF team's approach to this is that they have a hypothesis, okay, that neuropsychiatric illness is a condition that is potentially like evolved over time, okay, in each individual. And that by interacting with brain circuits in an online and dynamic way, that neuropsychiatric illness may be potentially unlearned, okay? And this is a very profound kind of way of thinking about neuropsychiatric illness, that we may be able to modulate brain circuits in such a way that you can unlearn neuropsychiatric illness. And they have a hypothesis that, there's a potential that if that is indeed true, that while we may initially use a device like this, again, to treat the neuropsychiatric illness, maybe some point in the future that device may be able to be removed. Now, again, this is very far out kind of a concept. From DARPA's term, we're willing to take a risk on something like this because it's based in very interesting science. And it may work out, it may not, but along the way, we, again, really feel like we're going to learn a lot about brain function. We're going to learn a lot about next-generation clinical therapies and a lot about next-generation kind of devices that could ultimately be used to deliver that kind of therapy. So, again, really excited about that. Again, we don't know if it'll work, but again, willing to take the chance on it to see what will ultimately happen there. The second team that I'd like to tell you about is a team led by Imad Eskandar, again, another neurosurgeon. Again, he's at Mass General Hospital and has assembled a wonderful team of, again, neuroscientists, computational neuroscientists, as well as hardware designers to address this problem. So he's teaming up with Draper Laboratories to develop the hardware for this kind of a problem. And the MGH team has also a very interesting perspective on neuropsychiatric illness and closed-loop neuroprosthetics. They have what's called a transdiagnostic approach. So again, neuropsychiatric illness involves many different structures of the brain. There are many different comorbidities of neuropsychiatric illness, and there are many different kind of behavioral expressions of neuropsychiatric illness. And what he seeks to do is that by using these closed-loop kind of neural interfaces, can we find the intersections amongst all of these three kind of axes of neuropsychiatric illness. Again, traditionally, when we think about these illnesses, you think of like that clinical behavioral diagnostic, but we know that there's much more than that. There's neurophysiology that is involving these circuits. Again, the behavior expression and comorbidities, it all comes together. They're trying to link these aspects with their transdiagnostic approach. So again, very early on for both of these teams, this project actually just started in June of 2014. They are both teams are already in their human clinical tests. They're collecting their initial data sets, doing their initial analysis, and developing their first generation kind of prototype devices. So again, extremely excited about the work that's ongoing on these programs. And between both the RAM and the Subnets program, we really feel like we're going to be developing or capturing one of the largest collections of human neurophysiologic kinds of data. Again, we're going to have great insight into the brain, into a wide variety of conditions. Again, really feel like that's going to help our understanding of brain function moving into the future. Okay, so those are our two clinical programs that are just getting started. I'd like to tell you about, again, the last area of our brain function research portfolio. And this is that foundational program that I told you about called NeuroFast, Neurofunction, Activity, Structure, and Technology. Again, everything that I've told you up to this point is based in electrophysiology. Again, electrophysiology kind of dates back, right, really to like 1700s. We know that there's a lot of limitations on that electrophysiology, right? You can only make observations of brain activity. But again, if we think back to the Brain Initiative, and the goals of the Brain Initiative is to understand brain activity, understand brain structure, and the behavior associated, in terms of the output and the inputs of the brain. So ultimately, what we want is all three components together simultaneously in awake behaving subjects. And today, we don't necessarily have the technology to do that. So again, at DARPA, we take a big risk and big leap, and we say, can we fundamentally change the way that we interface with the brain and do this in a really different way? And again, we pivoted on that question and said, look, optical interfaces with the brain are very interesting. Maybe they have the right characteristics to kind of solve this problem. So in the NeuroFast program, we have one performer on that, one team on that. It's made up of two very talented investigators, Carl Deiseroth and Krishna Shenoy. And what they have set out to do is really combine things like optogenetics with calcium imaging, with the clarity process, with closed-loop brain-machine interfaces. And by marrying all of those aspects together, again, in awake and behaving subjects, they may be able to have these kind of real-time observations of brain structure, activity, and behavior all together in a very comprehensive data set. And it's remarkable the techniques that this team is really rolling out. The NeuroFast program started in January of 2014. So again, they've been working a little bit longer, and they've developed some really remarkable kinds of techniques. They have real-time calcium reporters for neural activity. They're able to capture optically in 3D volumes of tissue, over 800 cells simultaneously, have again real-time time series readout from these optical reporters. They have fast laser systems for, again, traversing 3D volumes in order to capture the 3D structure. And then they also have the write-in capabilities using optogenetic techniques in order to modulate those neurons. So full read-write capacity in this program using optical techniques, and again, in awake behaving subjects. And again, there's some phenomenal work that's coming out of both of these laboratories, and you should see some of those results very near in the future. One of the great things about the NeuroFast program is that Carl and Christian are really pushing the envelope on this, and at DARPA we also like to push the envelope. And one of the aspects that they're also working on in conjunction with this work that they're doing in animal subjects is kind of like looking at excised tissue from human brains and applying these same kinds of techniques of looking at 3D volumes of brain tissue using not only these kind of fast reporters, but also looking at using the clarity process as well as neural stimulation. Again, to have some really interesting preliminary results from human neural tissue that we can also in that arena bring together these aspects. So again, very challenging, way out there, but again, these teams are willing to really push the envelope and are making great progress there. So really excited about the NeuroFast program. So that's kind of an overview of our progress and our programs thus far, again, spanning motor control, the Revolutionizing Prosthetics program, memory function in the Restoring Active Memory or RAM program, looking at neuropsychiatric illness and brain function in the subnets program, and then foundational technologies for new interfaces to the brain in the NeuroFast program. The last kind of couple thoughts that I would like to leave with the audience today is that again, we have a small set of teams that are working on these projects, but they are creating volumes and volumes and volumes of data associated with not only human but also animal subjects. And one thing that we feel very strongly on moving into the future, again, is that kind of that social contract of there are taxpayers that are investing in this kind of research. Again, we're making a big impact. But again, what's happening with the data? Again, how can we make the most out of the data? How can we leverage our expertise together in order to, again, make discoveries about the brain that are not only in these primary applications, but even the secondary applications. And kind of the last thing I'd like to do on the presentation today is to give the audience some provocations on the social contract for neuroscience research, okay? And again, I'm just going to kind of throw these things out there for the audience to think about, and maybe kind of take it back to your home institutions or your laboratories or wherever you may come from, kind of think about this moving forward. So the first provocation I'd like to throw out there is, think about the scale of the science that we're doing. We're going after some really big problems here. So the first provocation is, when challenges are too big for individuals to solve, sharing of data or sharing of techniques is not a choice, but a necessity. And again, by the way that DARPA is kind of constructing our projects, we are kind of requiring this, we're contractually requiring it. Again, we would like to think about this in the context of the broader portfolio of the neuroscience community about how we can change the way that we actually do neuroscience research, okay? And kind of take that idea a step further. We really think like the idea of the lone genius is becoming an increasingly unrealistic and unproductive archetype in neuroscience research. Again, the history of neuroscience research is, again, littered with the lone genius. But again, the scale and the kinds of problems that we are addressing now and into the future, I don't know if that model is really going to hold. So again, thinking about some really new and interesting ways of dealing with that. Another aspect that we feel is very interesting is the upcoming generation of scientists is really ready for a more open and collaborative approach, but the domain conditions really are not there yet, right? So again, young scientists, young investigators, they are living in a culture of sharing and social media and things like that. So again, the kind of stage is set and the stage is primed. But in the research arena, particularly in the neuroscience arena, I don't know if we have all of the tools or conditions to make that happen. So again, there may be some opportunities there, into the future. So again, next kind of provocation here is data sharing can support collaboration, but we feel that sharing alone is not the primary driver. Again, there's a lot of aspects that go into how we conduct neuroscience research and the tools that are there to support that next generation or next kind of ways of doing neuroscience research into the future. So again, we're very proactive to think creatively about these aspects in the future. Next provocation, again, for sharing to become a priority, collaboration must receive meaningful recognition and rewards. So here's another thing. So again, prior to my time at DARPA, I was an academic researcher. Again, I've been through the gauntlet of the tenure and promotion process. So I know at many universities across the U.S. as well as internationally that for tenure and promotion, data sharing or doing science in this way may not be a priority. But again, to address the problems that we're really interested in the future and to really live up to that social contract, maybe it should be part of that tenure and promotion process. So again, a provocation for all of those people that are sitting on those panels and thinking about those aspects, again, moving into the future. And again, if we do want to change some of those aspects, we should give incentives for sharing, rewarding teams and not individuals. Or maybe give incentives for sharing by measuring impact, not just publication. So again, a lot of people think of like publications and impact factors, but what I'm talking about here is not necessarily just that. It's the impact of neuroscience research on quality of life or medicine in general. Again, thinking about the Brain Initiative as a whole and how our scientific contributions can really elevate all of those kinds of efforts. Okay, so again, the kind of the last provocation that I would like to leave with the audience here is that deliberate growth of a new generation of hybrid players will accelerate progress. Again, maybe true, maybe not true, I don't know, but it's something that DARPA is very interested in learning more about, this kind of hybrid players in this new space here, and very interested in learning about new ideas from the community and kind of fostering those moving into the future. So with that, I'd just like to say thank you to everybody for listening in on this webcast. and would like to open up the floor if anybody has questions, and the moderators can, again, give some feedback on how to submit those questions through the online system. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Sanchez, for that informative presentation. Before we get started on the question and answer session, as you said, I would like to remind our audience how to submit questions. You can submit questions by typing them in the Q&A box, which can be found by clicking on the green Q&A button at the lower left of the presentation window. And we'll try to answer as many questions as we can.
One question here. Oh, hang on. Let me. All right. It says here, the military, as a rule, does not enlist people with ADHD, and yet, as a few years ago, the prevalence of ADHD is much higher in the military. Are you working on answers for this area? In the programs that I just described, we are not working on ADHD. There are many different branches of the DoD that are looking at a wide variety of neurologic or neuropsychiatric kind of disorders. Some of those may be working on this area, but again, within DARPA's purview, we're not specifically working on that particular problem. So thank you so much for that question. Any others moving forward?
Great. Thank you, Dr. Sanchez, for that answer. Can you tell us a bit more about the target patient population for traumatic brain injury and memory project? Is there a typical neuroanatomical profile to these patients?
So that's a fantastic question. Traumatic brain injury is an extremely difficult problem, and even just a diagnosis of traumatic brain injury, right? So we have these very loose terms, again, the medical community, like mild, moderate, severe traumatic brain injury. The nature of these injuries is very diverse. Everybody is very different. So we don't right now have a target population for this. Along the way, what one of our goals is to, again, try to characterize the types of injuries each individual may or may not have, and then put the therapy that we are developing, that closed loop therapy, in the context of that. So yeah, this is a huge challenge, and one that we don't have an answer for right now, but are going to try to characterize and come up with very precise approach to it moving forward into the future. So again, kind of mild, moderate, or severe is not good enough moving forward into the future. So again, thank you so much for that question.
Great. Thank you for that answer, Dr. Sanchez. Traumatic brain injury is a huge deal in the military, and I know many of our service members are suffering with that.
So thank you so much, everybody, for attending. Again, some fantastic questions here. Again, this is an unbelievable opportunity for neuroscience and neurotechnology, and to have a President's Brain Initiative as the kind of forefront of these efforts is just remarkable. And again, we're working really hard in order to deliver upon the promise of that effort and that initiative, and it's really a all hands on deck kind of approach. So we look forward to great progress on this, so please stay tuned. And again, thank you so much for participating in this event. And again, we need to solve these problems and again have to work really hard to do so. So thank you so much for your attention.
Thank you, Dr. Sanchez, for that presentation. I want to also thank the audience for their interesting questions and participation in today's event. Today's webcast will be available for on-demand viewing for the next few months. You'll receive an email from LabRoots alerting you when this webcast will be available for replay, and we invite you to forward that announcement to your colleagues who may have missed today's live event. Thank you again for your attention. See you next time. Goodbye.